America's debt clock is spinning faster than ever. Yet in July 2025, Congress passed the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, a sweeping, celebratory package boasting $4 trillion in tax cuts while piling on an extra $3 trillion in new debt. They say it's relief for families, certainty for business, and a promise of prosperity. But at what cost? In this episode of FluxFolio Finance, we break down who really benefits, who pays the price, and why this bill could make the U.S. economy dangerously vulnerable. Stick with us as we unpack the biggest fiscal experiment of the decade. Signed into law on July 4, 2025, the One Big Beautiful Bill is officially H.R. 1, a massive budget reconciliation package that Trump's administration hailed as the centerpiece of its economic agenda. It makes permanent the individual tax cuts first introduced in 2017, expands deductions, and boosts business incentives. But it pays for them in part with deep cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, while also shuffling federal priorities toward border security, immigration enforcement, and military spending. It slashes funding for clean energy subsidies championed under Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, while introducing new student aid restrictions, raising ICE and asylum fees, taxing elite university endowments, and creating Trump accounts, tax-advantage savings plans for children. Supporters call it comprehensive reform. Critics see it as a trade-off that sacrifices safety nets, climate goals, and long-term fiscal stability for tax relief, skewed toward the wealthiest Americans. Is it really beautiful, or is it a bold but reckless gamble with America's future? At its core, the One Big Beautiful Bill delivers a headline promise: $4.5 trillion in tax cuts over the next decade. For individuals, it permanently locks in the 2017 Trump-era lower tax brackets, keeps the nearly doubled standard deduction, and raises the cap on state and local tax deductions. It also introduces new deductions for tips, overtime pay, and car loan interest, moves aimed at signaling relief for working Americans. But scratch the surface, and the distribution of these benefits tells a different story. While middle and lower-income households do see some gains, like an increased child tax credit and the tip and overtime deductions, the biggest absolute dollar benefits flow to the top of the income scale. Analysts point out that the top 20% of earners capture around 70% of the bill's total tax relief, with the top 1% alone taking over 20%. Wealthy households with complex incomes, high SALT burdens, or large investment gains stand to save the most. The bill also delivers to businesses permanent full expensing of investments, doubled Section 179 caps for small business write-offs, and sustained 20% deductions for pass-through income, all designed to lock in the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act's incentives. Supporters say these moves will spur growth, raise wages, and deliver certainty. Critics argue it's a costly giveaway, deepening inequality while adding trillions to the national debt. It's the classic question: relief for all or a windfall for the wealthy? Let's talk about the bill's real price tag, and it's not just the advertised tax relief. According to projections from the Congressional Budget Office and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the One Big Beautiful Bill is expected to add roughly $2.8 to $3.3 trillion to deficits by 2034, and that's before you factor in the cost of servicing this new debt. Add interest, and the total fiscal impact could hit $4-5 trillion over 10 years. America's debt-to-GDP ratio, already alarmingly high, is on track to rise from around 117% pre-bill to roughly 124% by 2034. Long-term forecasts warn it could reach 183% by 2054, without major policy changes. What does this mean in practical terms? Higher interest payments for taxpayers, an extra $441 billion per decade just to service the debt, less flexibility for future stimulus when crisis hits, and the looming risk of credit downgrades, which could further raise borrowing costs and rattle financial markets. This also puts pressure on the country's already fragile entitlement programs. Medicare and Social Security face solvency challenges in the coming decades. Bigger deficits now mean fewer options to stabilize those pillars of the safety net later. Supporters of the bill argue the tax cuts will pay for themselves with growth. Critics say those projections are optimistic at best and dangerously misleading at worst. In a nation already $36 trillion in debt, this bill isn't just adding a little fuel to the fire. It could be the match that lights the powder keg. To partially offset the enormous cost of tax relief, the One Big Beautiful Bill makes deep cuts to Medicaid and other safety net programs, reducing federal Medicaid spending by roughly 12%, or about $1 trillion over a decade. But these aren't abstract numbers. The policy mechanisms are specific and harsh. States will have to impose new work requirements of 80 hours a month. Enrollees will face higher co-pays and fees. Eligibility checks will become stricter and more frequent, while retroactive coverage is stripped away. The human impact? Analysts estimate roughly 10.9 million people could lose Medicaid coverage altogether. Rural hospitals, already operating on razor-thin margins, face closures if they lose critical reimbursement flows. Families in small towns may see the only clinic for miles shut its doors. Meanwhile, the bill's defenders frame these changes as necessary waste reduction and efficiency improvements. They argue able-bodied adults should work for benefits and that states need flexibility to control costs. But behind the rhetoric lie real consequences: sicker, poorer communities with fewer resources, children losing CHIP coverage, and hospitals folding under financial pressure. This isn't just a budget adjustment. It's a policy choice that will shape the health and survival of millions of Americans. Another pillar of the One Big Beautiful Bill is its rollback of Biden-era clean energy incentives, effectively dismantling large parts of the Inflation Reduction Act's climate provisions. The law repeals tax credits for electric vehicles, solar and wind energy projects, clean fuel production, and green building retrofits. The immediate impact? Project cancellations, job losses among solar and wind installers, and reduced incentives for electric vehicle adoption. While Tesla is somewhat insulated thanks to scale and profitability, emerging players like Rivian and Lucid could struggle to stay competitive. Supporters of the repeal say it cuts government picking of winners and losers in energy markets, saving taxpayer money and boosting fossil fuel independence. But critics warn the real cost will be felt over decades. The rollback shifts investment away from renewables, ceding ground to China in the global race for clean energy dominance. It slows progress toward climate goals at a moment scientists warn action is urgent. Is this a fiscal reform or a strategic retreat from the industries of the future? Beyond tax cuts and safety net rollbacks, the One Big Beautiful Bill is packed with politically charged provisions that reshape federal priorities. It allocates roughly $170 billion for border and ICE enforcement. ICE's budget alone is set to surge from $10 billion to over $100 billion by 2029, expanding detention capacity to support up to 1 million deportations per year. Supporters tout it as border security finally getting serious. Critics see it as over-militarization with human rights costs. Student loan changes also make waves. The bill caps graduate borrowing and tightens income-driven repayment plans, promising fiscal responsibility while raising access barriers for low-income students. Another headline-grabbing feature is the new 8% tax on elite college endowments. While politically popular, it's projected to raise only about $760 million over 10 years, a drop in the bucket against the bill's multi-trillion-dollar price tag. Then there are Trump accounts, tax-advantage savings plans for children. They're touted as a way to help families invest in their kids' futures, but they're minor in scale compared to the broader cost of the bill. A sprawling wish list, but how much real impact does it deliver? Strip away the slogans, and the winners become clear. Wealthy individuals and corporations claim the lion's share of the bill's tax savings. Permanent full expensing rules let businesses write off investments immediately, boosting cash flow. Small businesses benefit from a doubled Section 179 cap and preserved 20% pass-through deduction. Founders and investors enjoy generous exclusions under QSBS rules. Opportunity zones, first championed in 2017, continue to attract capital with tax incentives, often benefiting well-connected developers more than truly distressed communities. For all the talk of middle-class relief, the bulk of the dollar benefits accrue to the top 20% of earners, especially the top 1%. Polling shows a public increasingly skeptical of trickle-down claims, with many seeing the package as a windfall for the wealthy, disguised as broad-based relief. It's a familiar story in American tax policy. Big promises of helping working families, with results that concentrate wealth even further at the top. Here's the risk few want to talk about. This bill doesn't just increase debt, it makes America's entire fiscal position more fragile. Tax cuts that aren't fully paid for drive deficits higher. Higher deficits mean higher interest costs, hundreds of billions more just to service the debt. That crowds out other spending from defense to education to research. As debt piles up, credit agencies get nervous. Downgrades loom, pushing interest rates even higher in a feedback loop of fiscal stress. Political fights over the debt ceiling become more dangerous, threatening market confidence with every showdown. And in a crisis, the government has less room to respond. Think of COVID-era stimulus or disaster relief. Those moves get harder, riskier, and more expensive when your balance sheet is maxed out. It's not just about this year's budget. It's about the ability to handle the next shock without teetering on the edge of default. So where does that leave us? The one big, beautiful bill delivers sweeping tax cuts. Yes, but it also slashes Medicaid, rolls back climate investments, and balloons the national debt by trillions. It promises relief for families, but skews the biggest gains toward the wealthy and corporations. It aims to strengthen America's future, while making its fiscal foundations even shakier. Is it truly beautiful policy, or a dangerous gamble with the nation's stability? That's the question only you can answer. Drop a comment below. Do you think America can afford this? Who really wins? And who pays the price? If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to like the video and subscribe to FluxFolio Finance for more deep dives that expose the forces shaping our economy, from the debt ceiling drama to the hidden trade-offs in major legislation. Stay informed, stay thoughtful, and let's hold power accountable, one video at a time.